Mel, and thanks, Steve. I have to say that of all the introductions I've gotten, that definitely was the most recent. And I want to thank Landmark also. This has been such an amazing 2 days for me to meet with many of you and have more meaningful conversations than any I think I've had at a conference. This is real, and it's good, and what you're doing is so good. But what I'm going to talk about is innovation in a more general way, because you're focused on social innovation, and that's really important. But I believe, and I'm passionate about the fact that innovation as a principle, as something that's happening today increasingly fast, is going to solve many of the problems that we've been talking about the last 2 days, or at least provide a major assist. Now, you've heard we're a trade association. We're based in Washington, D.C. We own and produce the world's coolest, funnest, largest business event in the world with amazing stuff. It's the CES. It's in Las Vegas every January. There's over 4,000 companies that exhibit, including over 1,000 startups. We have a special area because we love startups and we believe in them, called Eureka Park. And we heard one of the speakers yesterday talk about the intersectionality, if you will, not of race and all these things, but of different ideas, different ways of thinking. And what he said was, if you go to CES, go to another conference. What he really meant, there's no other room for any other conferences while we're there, because we have 180,000 plus people focused on innovation. But there are different industries and different verticals, and our job is to get those people there and get them to talk to each other and see the possibilities, because that's what innovation really is about. It's taking two totally different ideas and putting them together. And if we value skills today, in terms of the job market, advice I give for kids in the future is, learn different things, because your ability to put them together in a new way is what innovation is about. That, and of course, working on teams is really good as well. So when you look at CES and when you think of the future, there are different things that you've heard us talking about the last day or two. And what we know where the future is going in a lot of ways. We know that it's heading towards drones. And what you heard this morning was about from Dina of Google. You heard about Zipline in Rwanda and the delivery of important medical, blood, and other drugs and stuff all around the country. Everything's with a few minutes away because of drones. But drones are also today doing things. They're inspecting bridges. They're saving people from dangerous work. They're looking at agriculture. They're finding lost children. They're doing that. And it's increasingly we're heading towards a world where there's drone deliveries, which frankly will relieve some of the congestion on the ground, which is nice. We're also heading towards a world that's very important of self-driving vehicles. Now, over 1 million people die every year around the world because of car accidents. And 95% of that is human error. We could avoid most of those. Now, it's not going to be perfect, and we can't make the great become the enemy of the really, really excellent. But the fact is that we are going to cut driver deaths, and we're also going to empower people. We're going to empower the disabled, we're going to empower the elderly, and we're going to liberate them, and we're going to liberate land that we now use in cities for parking to be used more as pedestrian malls, to enjoy, to communicate with each other. And that's going to change the world. We're also heading towards a world of robotics. Now, robotics, I mean, and a lot of stuff that I'm talking about, you could immediately see the good, and of course, you could always balance it off and say, yeah, but this is also what could happen. Robots are the future. Now, I was a science fiction buff, and I really loved it. But we have a world that is aging, and there is basically, we're living longer, and no one's around to take care of people like me that are getting older, and you. I'm just doing it faster. The reality is that we are living a lot older now. And you know, what we're doing in terms of our workforce and things like that, they're just not there. So what we could have aging with technology in place, and that's increasingly happening around the world. And there's a lot of technology which senses different things. And why? Because there's a lot of sensors out there, and there's a lot of sensors out there because this thing called smartphones is taking over the world. And when you're producing it by the tens of millions, everything goes down in price. And every phone has over a dozen or so sensors in it. And those sensors now cost almost nothing. And they're doing more and more different things. It used to be just temperature and pressure. Now it's location. It's also going into blood and skin and dampness and perspiration. And you can measure almost anything. And we're going to that in so many different ways. And clever entrepreneurs are putting those together and creating all new services that make a difference. And that's really, really important. And those biometrics, that some of these things that are measuring, of course it's important to make really cool products like Fitbits or measuring your sports performance or doing things. But they're also there and available and will be used increasingly to solve some of the things we heard in probably the most moving session of the conference, was hearing about the shootings, which were so tragic. But increasingly with terrorism, with shootings, there are physical indicators out there which we now are starting to use frequently in airports, and they can be used in schools as well. And they're looking at things. They're looking at a person and being able to tell based on physical characteristics whether or not they're a threat. It could be their gait, it could be their facial expressions, it could be a voice analysis, it could be how their eyes are dilated, how they respond to questions. And of course, we do facial recognition now in large events like the Super Bowl anyhow to see if the bad guys are there. Now that is something where there's a little bit of interference with your privacy there, but you're trading off a little bit of your privacy before your safety. And what we found is that in our research of consumers is they're willing to do that. They're willing to give up privacy for a higher purpose, and the higher purpose in this case is safety. They're also willing to do it to share, as a lot of Apple Watch users do, to share medical information for a better purpose, and that is to help themselves, frankly, or to help other people with the similar types of problems, and so that can be correlated. So a lot of this is boiled around the fact of where we're going with artificial intelligence. And we saw yesterday a representative from Microsoft presented, as part of the Tech is Good, that artificial intelligence is being used to help people learn that have various diseases, to help empower them as human beings. But artificial intelligence will do so much more. It will allow predictive capabilities of things that are likely to happen. You sit in your car and your car will know you're likely to get sick unless you do something. So there's all sorts of things that you could do with that. But innovation is so important that we have ranked every state on how innovation friendly they are and things that you would expect, their broadband speeds, their education. And we've done that 4 years in a row, and we rank them. But we've also done it globally. And we've ranked countries by how innovation friendly they are if there's data out there. We've ranked about 40+ countries. And what we talked about is something different, though, than just we do broadband speeds and education, but we've also added values. Do you have liberty? Do you have the right to vote? Do you have the right to choose your mate? Do you have the right to access the internet? Do you have something equivalent to the First Amendment? Do you have real choices in life? And that's really important. Do you have clean air and clean water? We measure that as well. Are you open to new business models like Lyft and Airbnb, and Uber, of course, and others? And that's very important. And what we're doing is we're judging countries that way. It's a little awkward because China doesn't come across that well, frankly. But the world is, and I'm going to be in China next week because we have CES Asia in Shanghai next week. And if I don't come back, please notify somebody to come get me. But it is serious, is that the world is moving towards a group of countries. There's China and other countries which are focused on being controlled. They restrict, there is no such thing as privacy. China's measuring all your social media, and they're giving you a score, and that score determines whether or not you're allowed to travel. And hundreds of thousands of people have been stopped from traveling, and it's growing. They own the social media. That's helping their innovation. Then last week I was at The Hague in France, in the Netherlands, I'm sorry, and I spent 3 days talking about the future of the internet and accountability. And what I saw there was there's a very European view of privacy, which is you own absolutely everything. In fact, not you own your history. You have the right to go on and get factual stuff off the internet about you. If you're arrested, it's called the right to be forgotten. And just recently, as of last week, the new European directive, which affects so many companies around the world, says you have all sorts of rights. Now that affects innovation, because the truth is, I was sitting at a table like this, like you're sitting at now, and around me were people from Latin America and from Africa and others, and they were shaking their heads saying, this is a first world problem. Privacy is something which we value and you should value, but other things are more important. And the services like Facebook and Google and Yahoo and Twitter and others, which actually are free, although you're giving up information, are valued there in a way that allows equality. And you should think about that. And I'm thinking about, especially those of you in California who will be voting in November, there's a referendum which is the European thing, plus a lot worse. Private rights of action, all sorts of things you can't do, and it will really squelch innovation, and it's very dangerous. To close, because my time is almost up, We are blessed, many of us here, to be living in the United States, which is a country which leads the world today in innovation. We've gotten here because one of the things we measure globally, and I believe in here, is we are the most diverse country in the world. We have more sorts of different people of different cultures and races and religions and everything else here than any other country, with the possible exception of Israel and maybe Canada. And it depends how you measure. But that is why we're innovative. We're innovative because we're also an immigrant culture. We come here because we ask why and why not. Why can't you do that? It's culturally, we're always pushing the envelope. We're not great at rote learning, I'll admit that, but we are good at questioning, and we have a legal system which helps us, whether it's our tax laws or our First Amendment, that allows us to create new business models without the government shutting us down. And that's really important. So the question we should be asking, we have to ask ourselves, how we could benefit from innovation in the future and do what you're doing and solve all these big problems of the world involving agriculture, food production, clean water, education, transportation, mobility. Everything we talk about today as a problem is solvable as we innovate more and more, and we know we can do it. Thank you very much. It's been a great honor to be here.